Hello, everyone. A very good afternoon to you all. I am Meenakshi Shekhawat, welcoming you all on behalf of Solar Quarter and First View Group to the first day of Eastern Solar Week. Hope you had a good time networking with your peers today. We all have those networking sessions again at the end of each session. Now it's time for us to start with our conference, but before that, I take the pleasure to thank our platinum partner, Jinko Solar, for extending their immense support to organize this event. I request my team to play the sponsor videos.
Time where energy systems around the world are undergoing fundamental changes. The balance between fossil fuel and renewable energy sources is shifting. Yet 850 million people are still living without access to electricity. In this changing world, society and business share one crucial challenge. How can we meet the rising demand for energy and at the same time protect the climate? Ensuring access to clean and sustainable energy for all in an economically sensible way. To address the challenge, innovation and technological development play a fundamental role in building an effective solution, and Jinko Solar is one of the solution providers. Jinko Solar is one of the world's leading companies in the clean energy sector, pioneering the vertical integration business model along the entire value chain from the wafer, cell to solar module. With its 12 factories, 25,000 employees in more than 35 countries, Jinko Solar is well positioned to serve the requirements of a heterogeneous customer base. Jinko Solar is the first solar company to deliver more than 70 gigawatt panels to over 3,000 customers in 160 countries, accounting for 1/10 of solar electricity generated worldwide, making the company hugely relevant for assuring future sustainable energy supplies. Unmatched large and diverse global customer base helps to smooth fluctuations in demand, which in turn helps the company maintain a high level of capacity utilization and profitability. With a highly competent and dedicated R&D team, Jinko Solar has broken 15 world records in cell and module efficiency, deployed 2,387 technology patents home and abroad. For advanced cell technology, the company's 24.9% efficiency N-type cell continues to progress in the pipeline. Jinko Solar is the capacity leader with 33 gigawatt wafers, 27 gigawatt cells, and 37 gigawatt modules by end of 2021. Moreover, globally distributed capacity is the foundation for Jinko Solar's manufacturing excellence. Flexibility to meet the needs of diverse customers, accurate delivery, unmatched customer service, ability to quickly ramp up and maintain high yield make manufacturing excellence one of the core strengths for Jinko Solar. Jinko Solar is leading the world towards clean energy transition and driving continuous innovations in PV technology to keep building your trust in solar.
Jinko Solar creates a workplace where our people thrive and success. We're here to talk about them, the people who bring our technology and products to empower the world in the cleanest and most sustainable way. The people in our labs, our factories, our offices, our warehouse. We are committed to create a space where they're respected, engaged, encouraged, and fulfilled. And this is how we're making this happen. As the world's first solar company joining RE100, we're committed to be 100% powered by the renewables by the year 2025. We plan to reach this goal across global managed portfolio. To do that, we locate newly built factories in renewable-rich regions. We install all available factory rooftops with solar. We significantly increase in supine and off-site renewable electricity sources. We optimize energy efficiency across our operations. We are proud of the impact we have. Through our development activities across the world, we're supporting local economy and employment. We are further maximizing our social impact through community donation and educational partnership. We recognize the importance of managing ESG risks and opportunities and have created a culture that enables everyone at Jinko Solar to act lawfully and responsibly. Our structure is well established and ensures we always operate in the best interest of our stakeholders. We promote transparency, ongoing dialogue, and compliance, and have embedded a governance framework that enhances corporate performance. It enables us to have a consistently positive impact on environment and communities. We are proud of what we are making. Change today's energy portfolio and take the responsibility of the future.
Thank you, team, for playing the videos. Now let me quickly take you through the agenda. We will be having two sessions. Our first session will be on financing and constructing large-scale solar projects. And after that, in our second session, you'll hear our expert panelists discuss how mini grids are electrifying the region. And now, without further delay, let's begin our first session, which is on financing and constructing large scale solar projects. And to discuss this, we have in panel with us Mr. Okello Allen from Village Power and Uganda Solar Energy Association. He's also the moderator for this session. Mr. Beatrice Mutoni from Infraco Africa, Mr. Duncan Bogo from Aria Finergy. The session will be led by Okello Allen, Village Power, and Uganda Solar Energy Association. Now I welcome all our panelists on the screen and handing the session over to Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen, over to you.
Thank you very much. Mic check, mic check. All right, so this session is about financing and constructing large-scale solar projects. And we have a panelist, three panelists. I can just have them introduce themselves before we begin. We can start with Beatrice, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Beatrice Muthoni. I'm a business development manager with Infraco Africa. Infraco Africa is a part of the Peach Group. I've been with Infraco Africa for the last 3 years, and my background is in engineering, and I have been in the energy sector for more than 12 years now, I think. So Infraco Africa is part of a bigger group called the Peach Group, Private Infrastructure Development Group. It is a group that is funded by FCDO. We have fulsome solutions to the funding of infrastructure projects. So we are basically the Peach Group, the Private Infrastructure Development Group, is a conglomerate of companies that fund infrastructure projects. So as part of the group, Infraco Africa puts in like early stage equity into development, and specifically for renewable energy projects, because that is what we are discussing today. We come in pretty early in the projects and put in early stage development equity into the projects and take a stake in the SPV that is developing the project. And our financing goes through into construction phase and a little bit into the operations, and then we exit once the projects are operational and have positive cash flows. That's Infraco Africa. As part of the Peach Group, we also have Emerging Africa Infrastructure Group. They provide senior debt to the projects. We pride ourselves in saying we have like a complete solution to the development of infrastructure projects. So maybe some of the projects that we have funded in East Africa. For Infraco Africa, we're looking at 2 projects in Kenya, 10 megawatts in Samburu and Transmara, 2 solar projects in Kenya. From EIF perspective, we have funded 2 projects in East Africa, and I'm narrowing my experience to East Africa because that's probably the audience today. But we have a lot more projects. We have Toronto, a 10 megawatt, Tororo, a 10 megawatt project in Tororo, Uganda, where EAIF put in 7.5 million into the project. And then coming closer home to Nairobi, I am based in Nairobi. I'm based in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya. We have funded the KESES 40 megawatts. EAIF has funded KESES 40 megawatts to a tune of 35 million. So, and then we have Garantco, also part of the Peach Group. That gives credit guarantees, basically, to the projects. So we are a complete group. We would come as a one-stop shop to project developers who want investment in early stage debt, both debt and equity, and guarantee into the project. Probably when I'm during the course of the panel, I will explain much in more details. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have quite a few questions on how people can join the portfolio. All right, let's have Duncan go next. Duncan Mbongo.
Yeah, good afternoon and good morning, wherever you are. My name is Duncan Bogo, finance manager of Aria. I've been with Aria since inception, field of CNI, that is commercial and industrial. We do the funding, we do the EPC and O&M. We have also diversified in energy stabilization and power stabilization and storage. And much to that, we are what we do is that we assess your energy capacities and the requirements, and then we come in with both funding and installation and implementation of the project, both in East Africa, widely in Kenya and also in East Africa. We have done several projects in Uganda and some in the pipeline, ranging from 200 to 3 megawatts. We are venturing into Tanzania with a 5 megawatt project, and also very soon into the DRC. Much to that, we are also a fully equipped EPC company, providing the O&Ms and the rest, working with the clients to the end. And we'll chat more about how we do our financing in the course of the seminar.
Good. Thank you very much. And then last but not least, let's have Mr. Lorenzo. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but maybe you can also walk us through that.
Yes, my last name has always been a problem, especially at school. They were never able to call me correctly. It's Kolachiki. Anyway, my name is Lorenzo Kolachiki. I'm speaking from Nairobi right now. I'm CEO of Ergon Solaire. We have been operating in solar since 2005, but actually I've been operating in solar since 1999. And my first pro forma invoice was actually addressed to a Kenyan company. So I have an old history with East Africa Solar. Historically, we are a full value chain operator in the solar spectrum. We've operated from silica sand all the way through the entire value chain. Right now, our major focus is on development and European finance. We are developing a 40 megawatt solar power plant in Kisumu, one of the old Kenyan projects. That's everybody that does projects in Kenya knows what we go through and what we've been going through. And we also have projects in Uganda, in Malawi, in DRC, in Tanzania, in Ghana, Zambia, we're about to start projects, and in Zimbabwe. We are currently focused primarily on Euro-African cooperation. Projects that are supported by the European Union in cooperation with African government. That is our main focus right now, and later I will get more into detail into that.
All right, thank you very much. With the protocol out of the way, I think we can jump right into the panel discussions. The first question I'd like to field to the panelists is about financing options. So what options are available for large solar projects within the region of East Africa? Maybe Lorenzo, you can pick up from there to see what sort of financing options are available on your end.
Having developed, being one of the old-time developers of the famous Kenyan 40 megawatt projects, I've seen them all, although I've never met the people that are speaking here. So I haven't seen actually everybody, but I've seen a lot. I've interfaced with, I've seen bank, all the major petrol companies, all the major European financiers, American financiers, Chinese, you name it. But it's often a complicated road to go down because there's often a lot of mistrust towards the African markets, problems with the PAs, problems with this, problems with that. So actually bringing in, going into actual financial closure for $40-50 million project is quite an adventure in this part of the world. But about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, I learned about certain opportunities from Europe, which we have as a group becomes very specialized in right now, which is funding under the Cotonou Agreement, which is now called the Post-Cotonou Agreement, which goes under the facility of the ACP EU partnership and is financed technically under the Global Europe facility. This is not a very well-known program. Even though I consider myself expert in this field, and until a little less than a year ago, I did not even know that it existed. We're looking at a program of 29 billion euro to support sub-Saharan Africa, and they're totally grants. It's not debt funding; they're grants, and grants of up to 20 million euro per project, which is on a 30-40 megawatts project or on a 20 megawatt project is a big chunk of the funding. And these are extremely available, quite complicated to structure, but available. And they also offer an interesting opportunity of integrating solar into other operations. For instance, we're looking at building solar integrated villages, building youth centers and hospitals with a large-scale solar integration. So there are many different ways of working these programs into a solar project, including also directly into the equity of a utility scale 40 megawatt project. And again, we're talking about grants, so it's free money, which is always a pleasure. And especially when you look at countries like Kenya, which are pushing towards a more competitive PPA tariffs in a market that is actually going up and not going down right now. This gives a helping hand to be able to deal with these requirements. When you're able to lower your capex by 20% or 25%, it's a big helping hand in reaching a tariff of 5 or 6 cents, which is what is requested right now as example in Kenya. And we are working, we have about over 1 billion euro for projects right now throughout East Africa and Central Africa, all tied in with this program and all solar utility based, either solar utility projects or solar utility connected. In other words, connecting social operations with solar.
Okay. Well, that's really, really, thanks for sharing that. And are there any critical criteria that these large-scale utility companies need to meet? Is there a minimum sort of time they have to have existed for them to access these sort of funding options?
Yes and no. It's not. It's a very new formula that's been set up by the European Union, because even though the Cotonou Agreement is old, it's been a sort of failure up to now. So there's very few people who've used it, very few governments also. Now they've sort of revolutionized the mechanism. They've made it a little bit much different. In other words, the mechanism in a nutshell is that whatever project you want to fund under this program, first of all, has to be endorsed by the government. You need government endorsement.
Okay.
After which, you have to assign a European company to actually deliver the project. In other words, because this grant is only given to European entities.
Okay.
So you assign a European entity which takes over the project. They apply for the grant, they receive the grant, and then they are the general contractor of the project until commissioned. These are the core conditions. The European company must either be able to show very happy-looking balance sheets, or else put in guarantees to the European Union for in exchange for grants, guaranteed performance bonds substantially. But again, it's not that. So, and of course, it's public money, so the usage is very critical. How the money is used is very critical, and it must, of course, respond to whatever is approved actually by the European Union.
All right, understood. That's very clear. Thank you for sharing. I would like to hear from Beatrice's side. What funding opportunities are available for large-scale solar projects in the region? I think you're muted.
Yes, I am on mute. I switched on my camera and thought I switched on my mic. Sorry about that. Yeah, interesting solution there, Lorenzo. I haven't actually heard about it, so it'd be interesting to actually learn more about it. But following up on my introduction, what is available from us, and I think maybe generally in the markets, what I can say is there is quite a number of solutions that are available for funding large IPPs and specifically solar projects. It depends on the size, it depends on the governments, it depends on there's a lot of dependencies on the kind of financing that you'll need. But essentially what we as the Pitch Group does, as I said, we're a wholesome solution. It doesn't mean that if you say take Infraco Africa as an equity provider to your project, then you have to take EAIF, but we offer a very, very competitive solution to the developers. So I would say for early stage development, when the project is most risky, and I think there's very few investors or financiers who are willing to come in at very early stage. Most of the time, developers are for lack of a better term, like scouting around for funding for the development phase of the project, because everybody looks at the project and it's a very risky phase of the project. So Infraco Africa, one of our biggest additionality in projects is the fact that we come in quite early in the project, de-risk the project as early as maybe just a feasibility study. The project has not gotten any PPAs at all. So de-risk the project to a very big extent until the project gets to financial close, when it's a little bit attractive to investors, because depending on the geographical jurisdiction, depending on the country really, then at that point, then other private investors are willing to come in. So I would say one of the options that the developers have is actually early stage financing, development financing, which can come in form of equity. And that's where Infraco Africa, our specialist is. But also there are some debt providers that are providing debt at early stage development phase of the projects. So depending on the size of the project, we could have one lead equity investor, and then that could be sufficient. Most of the time it is sufficient for 30 to 50 megawatt scale solar projects. However, it's the very large scale projects, 100 megawatts, which is, I think, rare for solar projects specifically. Hydro projects are usually the bigger ones. Then you can have a syndicate or a group of equity investors coming in early stage. Progressing into the projects at financial close, then you find like we have debt, which one of the pitch companies, EAIF, is, and others. There are quite a number of debt providers out there. And I think that comes naturally as like a project finance structure. Most of the time, you'll find it's a syndicate. I'm yet to see, especially for projects that are above 30 megawatts, then you find one debt provider is not able to cover the whole debt. So you find it's a syndicate with a lead debt provider, and that comes into play at financial close, where like this very structured, everything is well known. You have a PPA, everything is basically known in the project. It's just like a matter of shovel ready and construction. And then one last group of options that are available for developers is at operation stage, once the project is now complete, commissioned, and in operations, then there's a provision for refinancing the projects. There's quite a large pool of financiers now that are out there, not even necessarily a traditional financiers. We are talking even pension schemes are catching up in the infrastructure space. And we are seeing more and more like local currency pension schemes going into projects that are already operational because now they are fully de-risked. Yes, maybe I'll just stop at that for now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was actually going to follow up with, are these investments mostly in local currency or foreign currency?
Well, for now, we're seeing more hard currency investments because there's talk of local currency PPAs, which I think is what would drive the local currency investments. I think in Africa, only Morocco and South Africa has actually signed local currency PPAs, but it's from the recent, there's a recent task force in Kenya that recommended local currency PPAs like going forward. But more and more, or traditionally, it has been hard currency investment. However, at operation stage, because then the capex is already like the project is fully de-risked at that point, then you see more than the local currency investment.
Good, thank you. This is really exciting. I mean, why are people not getting more financing then for their projects? That's a question for later. Let's have Duncan weigh in with his options for financing.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Lorenzo and Beatrice. And unlike Lorenzo and Beatrice, who are 20, 30 megawatts plus, on our end, we now weigh into the 5 megawatts plus industrial companies, which are mostly, one, either backed by the balance sheet, or two, depending on what form of industry they are in and how strong they are. However, we have seen that most of these companies, when we go out there to source for funds, most of them are either looking for a way of integrating the system, the solar system, with some storage, which is making it a little bit expensive, of over, say, 5 million plus USD. From our end, we mostly, and we have always given, we are in the debt side of things, not the equity or not the equity side of things. So, and our debt is always hedged in hard currency for the purposes of risk mitigation. And we have observed that most of these companies, in case you are in an industry which is very volatile or which might be affected highly by the changes of the, say, environment and the rest, we tend to be a little bit cautious, and even the funders tends to be a little bit cautious on that. And the balance sheet always weighs in such a scenario. My question to Lorenzo and Beatrice would be, how then do you, apart from the 30 plus megawatts, which are always backed by the government, say an industry has a private industry that has energy capacity of, say, 10 megawatts or 5 megawatts, what would you be looking for? Because from our end, we always check on the balance sheet. Balance sheet will be the key in terms of financing. What else can give you comfort for you to fund such projects?
Yeah, Lorenzo, Beatrice, that's an open question to both of you.
Well, thanks, Duncan. What I would say for Infraco Africa specifically, we actually fund small projects. Only for this particular panel, I was speaking of the large IPPs because that was like the topic. However, we are very happy actually to fund smaller projects, even CNI type of projects. We have two top two criteria to check on in these projects. One is usually the financial sustainability of the project. Basically, it needs to bring in cash flows that will pay eventually the investors. And for us, impact is one of the top agendas. Of course, climate action and women empowerment; those are additional ticks. But impact on the communities or the people or the larger communities basically is critical. However, also what maybe might tie our hands is the ticket size, because a lot of times 5 megawatts is substantial. So if 5 megawatts is good enough, I think it would attract a good ticket size. However, you find most of the time the C&I projects are smaller in size. So unless you have a portfolio of them, a conglomerate of them, then the ticket sizes are usually very small for financiers. Maybe Lorenzo can add on.
Yeah, Lorenzo, please go ahead.
Yeah, in part I would overlap on what Beatrice was saying in terms of in terms of balance sheet. Since we work with grants, we wouldn't even look at that. It would not be important to us because our issue with balance sheets is our European partner company that has to have its balance sheet relationship with the European Commission. The actual local project in Kenya, Uganda, wherever it is not, we don't look at it from that point of view. What we do look at is the more sort of political points. Number one, the project has to be backed by the government. In other words, there must be a minister that endorses the project saying it's important for the country. This is a number one key point, because in the mechanism under which we fund is under an institutional partnership between African countries and the European Union. So the African country where the project is must visibly agree to it by endorsing it. Secondly, all the impact issues, like also Beatrix was mentioning, sustainability, adhesion to the SDGs, gender parity, these are the things we would look at very, very much, and it could bring a yes or a no to the project. We would not do a solar project for a facility that makes missiles or for a meat packing company. I don't think we would do that. Mm-hmm. But if it's a solar project for an industry that that is sustainable in its activity and respects gender parity, human rights, does not create pollution, and respects all the parameters, we could say, of the SDGs as a sort of guideline, European taxonomy, then it would be a green light. There are limitations there are no real limitations in terms of the amount, but indirectly there are, because it's such a complicated and costly process to get this funding, that below $4 or $5 million projects, it's not really might not be interesting anymore. It might the complications might become more than the actual benefits from the grant, because in any case, the upfront expenses to be able to access these grants are fairly high in terms of high-level feasibility studies, high-level, everything has to be done at the sort of AAA quality. You cannot do a cheap, low-cost, easy-going EIA. You have to do a high-profile EIA. Everything has to be high-profile. So this sort of creates some limitations. But again, writing balance sheets is no limitation.
Got it. That is really interesting. And that actually is a good segue into our next question, which is around basically the blueprint for constructing these utility solar projects, and what are the major challenges you usually face. So Lorenzo, like you've just touched on one of them, which is maybe the costs associated to making sure that it's AAA quality across the whole value chain of setting up this project. But maybe you could sort of flesh out a few more things that need to go into this blueprint for constructing these solar projects.
Well, anybody that does development sort of knows that there are two ways of doing a feasibility study. There's the cheap way and there's the expensive way. Usually, anybody in Kenya, because of all the issues of the difficulty in obtaining funding in the early stage, will try to follow the cheap way until you get the PPA signed, and then you override everything and go the expensive way. And that, in some cases, it works. I mean, it's a strategy that undoubtedly we all use to mitigate our risk, because risk mitigation is the name of the game when you're in development. In some formulas, when you're doing projects with the European Union, the World Bank, or USAID, and these people, you cannot really go down that road because you don't get anywhere if you do that.
Mm.
And what does that come down to? It's there's no magic. You just have to do what they tell you to do. Basically, they tell you. In other words, if you're doing an environmental and social impact assessment, and they tell you you have to go to companies that are listed and accredited with them, and they tell you who they are, you have to use those. You cannot use your local friend engineer. In reality, your local friend engineer, example in Kenya, all of this does not really make any sense from a technical point of view. Because once NEMA has accepted your EIA, whether it's done by John or by Robert or by Jeff, it's still an EIA that's passed and has been accepted. But when you're working with the big institutions, it doesn't work that way. They don't really care. They have their own rules, and you have to follow them. And that sort of goes down the line, whether you're doing the EIA, the grid assessment, project design. You have to use professionals that are highly accredited and that can prove that they've done hundreds of megawatts and have worked for these major, have a background that worked for these major institutions. Otherwise, they'll just tell you to do it again. They will. But,
yeah. Okay, no, that's really interesting. So they basically, it's a typical grant, basically, where they specify what needs to be in place for you to move to the next step.
Unfortunately, they don't.
Ah, okay.
Well, in the case of the European, in most cases they do, but in the case of the European Union, they don't. They expect you to know it already and do it already as they want. And then if they're not happy, they tell you to do it.
I'm glad we're having this discussion now.
It's very complicated. Difficult.
Yeah, I think we'll touch more on that a little bit later. But I wanted Duncan to weigh in a bit on this as well.
As Lorenzo had mentioned, the catch is always on the regulatory side of views, whereby you are required to meet certain criteria, use certain high top-notch lawyers for verification, certain engineers specifically from their end. From our end, we have experienced one which was funded by the UK firm. We have one funded by NCF, the Nordic Climate, which had 1,000,001 restrictions, whereby you had to get specific approvals from specific top-notch kind of people only recognized internationally, and that tends to take a lot of time and also be very expensive in terms of the implementation and the rest. That tends to slow down so many things in the process, and then takes over 18 months before you finalize the whole process. So the regulatory side of view tends to take ages. And then we come to our government here. If in case you want to get the EPRA's approvals, also that takes huge amount of time and resources and energy back and forth before you get the approvals. So such regulations always delays a lot of projects, maybe in the pipeline or what you have planned to implement. It's all about the regulator.
Okay, and is your solar association supportive in trying to fast track some of these things, or is this something that would actually benefit the sector if it becomes if you involve your sector?
Yes, one of it is the sector, which is the approver. That's the EPRA. The EPRA is the body which approves all the energies related items in Kenya, and then we have the one that specifically deals with solar, called KEREA. Somehow they are supportive, yes, but still at the end of the day, when it gets to the government offices, tends to be slow. If you are told we will approve this after 90 days, so 90 days becomes 90 days. Nothing can be done before the 90 days, and then after the 90 days, now that's when you start engaging the process. That's always the catch. But KEREA is trying. EPRA is also coming up somehow. We hope to get there soon, where the approvals will be done in due time.
Okay, great. Yeah. That's good to hear. Some hope. Beatrice, what about you? On your end, what are the typical blueprints for constructing these utility scale solar projects, and what major challenges have you or your team faced?
Well, I will not repeat what Duncan and Lorenzo have said. It's just, for me, I think what Lorenzo has said just is very, it rings like it's very realistic. And maybe skills transfer is something that we need actually to invest in terms of, you find that sometimes investors or whoever is providing the money, requirements are so high that even we should have a situation where the local companies are able to meet such high standards in future. However, I think the challenges are across the group is usually time for us. The time it takes, the government support, time it takes to get all the licenses required, times it takes. Sometimes even the process of acquiring the licenses is not clear. So most of the time you find a lot of developers are just like fumbling in the dark and not very sure of the process. And where the process is very clear, it's the timelines that are stipulated in the regulations are not adhered to. So I think that generally the challenges, I would agree with Duncan and Lorenzo. But what I would say, I think if the government is supportive, and I think Lorenzo mentioned this for the criteria. One of the criteria to get the grants is the government support. If the government is supportive, we see projects accelerated as long as they have the government backing.
Good. And so, in general, how are these opportunities or these projects tendered? How do more companies find out about these projects where they can basically qualify for access to this funding, but also make more access to energy available for East Africans?
Well, I think each country has their own different methodology. For Kenya specifically, I think up to a certain time, right now, I think in Kenya it's just a bit of haziness because there's the freeze of negotiation of PPAs. But it used to be like a developer identifies a project, presents it to Ministry of Energy and then to EPRA, and then it's approved and it's developed and constructed. However, I think we are seeing more and more a shift from the recent reports in Kenya specifically, a shift to the auction for solar, specifically for solar and wind. I think the shift is going towards the auction, where projects are auctioned, and I think the lowest price, or I don't know the criteria to just select the bidder, then develops the project. So for other countries, I'm not sure I can speak for other countries. We have investments in Malawi And the same as Kenya, the developer identifies projects and develops them, the government approves, and the construction progresses. So I think it's very different for different countries, if I may say that.
Understood. Duncan, I assume it's probably the same for your end. You're also based in Kenya, right?
Yes, I'm based in Kenya. It's the same. Rarely do you see them advertised in the Ministry of Energy or the rest. Yeah, it's the same as what Beatrice has said.
Is there a secret WhatsApp group we need to join to get these projects?
We have not heard of one, but just in case we're here,
Okay,
we'll let you know.
good. And Lorenzo, is this the same for your end as well?
More or less. I judge Kenya from the energy sector currently as a total disaster, just to be very, very clear. The way things were before the moratorium and all this craziness that came out was there were a lot of problems. I mean, there were definitely a lot of problems before, but more or less there was a working mechanism that once you understood the interrelationships between the ministry, PRA, and et cetera, you sort of managed to work with it one way or another. After which the president had a very bad idea of reducing in 4 months the cost of units to consumers, and I don't know who gave him that advice, but it was not good advice, and unfortunately he followed it, and this created a chain reaction of numerous problems and the inactivity of the ministry, and it put the whole sector in a very bad, chaotic position. Hopefully, whichever new government there is will realign things in a bit more of a working manner. The way things are right now, you just there's no processing. You just don't know what to do anymore. You don't know which door to knock on because they're all they've all stopped being doing what they're supposed to do. And other countries, yes, each has a bit their own way of operating. One of the reasons also why we moved into this new formula with the grants is also to get away a bit from all of this problem, surpass the problem of discussions on tariffs and these problems, and just come in and say, okay, we're offering you a 20 megawatt to BES project. Tariff is not an issue. Do you want it? Yes, or you don't want it? No. If you want it, you say yes, then we come and do it. It's sort of very straightforward. Because there's a lot of confusion in the market right now in all of Africa. There's not a set of rules that is straightforward and easy to follow. Maybe I've never done projects in South Africa, but from what I've heard, it's fairly well organized. The rest is you have to live with the situation, and inshallah, hope things will go okay.
Yeah, that's true. And I just wanted to sort of pick on that string you're pulling at. Excuse my cuckoo bird. It's telling me 5 minutes to the hour. Yeah, so on the issue of there's a lot of confusion. Is there also confusion around the technology side of things? Like, is it prescribed, the minimum technology requirements for implementing these projects? And with regard to that, what is the expectation of the project owners in the future? So from your end with the EU, is the expectation for there to be an upgrade of, for example, the battery storage, or is it left up to you to decide on that?
There are no real expectations from that point of view. Of course, things have to work. Things have to be projects have to be well designed, have to be bankable. Modules, inverters have to be from companies with all the required guarantees, performance guarantees, etc. But there's no major. They don't say you have to do with batteries or you have to do without. No major, or even a little bit too elastic from that point.
Okay. Has that been the same on your end, Duncan, as well? Is that the same experience you've had with regard to technology standards?
Not really. There is somehow. The other day we were bidding for a USAID backed project, and the recommendations that they had for the solar panels was a 240-watt panel, which somehow has been overtaken by events and time. We are currently at 620-watt panel. So on the other hand, in terms of how they prepare those documents, we had to go back and forth with them to convince them that we are no longer doing the 240s mono. We have poly. We have moved on to higher efficiency panels. So somehow we still need, as much as technology is not an issue in some. We have experienced this twice, so it's an issue, but not a big one, because once you convince them that this has been overridden by time, then they change on their requirements.
Okay, great. Petrus, I think you can also weigh in on this.
I would say, I think maybe just a step back. If the solar technology is relatively, I think now we can say it's relatively well developed. Is it the end of the development in solar? No, I think we still have a very long way to go. And from watching the Jinko solar videos, it's clear that there's still a lot to do in terms of efficiency, in terms of the technology itself. However, as investors and co-developers of projects, of course, we just ask for best quality of stuff in the projects. I think one, so that you at least have the latest. And Duncan, when Duncan was just saying of 240, I was just like, whoa, that's a very old panel. So yeah, the advancement in technology is definitely a key consideration. However, I would say we are still developing. And I think, as you mentioned, batteries, and one of the key criteria that we use as we're selecting projects as Infraco Africa is like innovative projects. And one of the projects, most of the projects that we back are projects that also have like a battery component. And we know relatively they're more expensive, and probably most of the battery component is actually grant funded. But the impact of the batteries on the whole, like most of the grids in sub-Saharan Africa, is actually very good, and that is actually tested. One of our projects in Malawi that we just commissioned a few weeks or months ago. So yeah, technology is advancing. We hope for a sustainable, good guarantees. Right now there is all these stories of China and the the panel manufacturers and the labor and the forced labor. All those are considerations that we make because of it. As investors, of course, you also want to have good reputation and you want reputable suppliers in your projects.
Yeah, that's true. One thing I wanted to also touch on was, so on the O&M side, so after the project is developed, do you outsource, first of all, the O&M side to a service provider or an external company, or do you guys run them in your projects in-house? And then how is it usually done for these projects, and what's the best model from your experience?
I will start. I think maybe Duncan would be best placed for this question. But for the projects that we have co-developed, we have seen two main structures of operation. So the most common structure is where there is a special purpose vehicle, an SPV, in country of in the country of operation, like in the country where the project is. Which then employs project managers at the beginning of the project, and then during operations they hire more people to operate the projects. That's, I think, the most very common structure that we have seen. So in-house operations. However, we've also seen projects where they have outsourced their O&M function, and most of the time it comes with the EPC contract. So you see a lot of EPC plus O&M. So a project has an EPC contractor who doubles up as an O&M operator, basically for first maybe 2 or 3 or 5 years of the project. Then after that, then the SPV can also carry up as they transfer the skills as well, then the SPV can carry on the operation. So there are two models I have seen in the region, and maybe I'll hand over to Duncan to expound more on what he has said.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Duncan, please go ahead.
Hello, sorry, I missed a point.
Oh, we were asking what type of O&M models you've seen. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes,
Yes.
from our end, O&M becomes a pivotal element once you have developed a system. And what we have is that we have a fully equipped O&M team on our end, because we have noted that most of the projects have to be checked after they have been developed to ensure that they are producing to the optimum, so that the original concept is not wiped out, such that some inverters failed, some strings do not stop working after 2 years or 1 year. And that the O&M contract is normally pre-developed as you are even before even in the process, before taking up the project and implementing it. You have the O&M contract also, which clearly defines what shall be done after the project. And it forms part of our main and our core business, which now gives the confidence to the end user that the end user also gets the confidence on the system performance all through the period, and also the guarantees and the warranties which were there in the contract. There is a confidence always that the system shall perform as it was intended to. So O&M is pivotal, and a good team is key.
Yeah, I agree. Lorenzo, do you have anything to weigh in on the O&M side? Are there any specific criteria that for O&M under your grants?
Under the programs we work with, no, not particularly. And this also because we are blessed by the fact that we propose the project in its entirety, including its operation and maintenance as part of the package that is proposed and either approved or not approved. Nobody tells us how or what we're supposed to do. But general practice, we would subcontract it to the EPC.
Okay, understood. And on the side of the O&M that I'm really interested in, and I'm sure a couple of the people here would be interested to understand a bit more, would be on the after-sales service side. So is that under the O&M contractor or under the SPV for things like replacements, or is that costed into the project from the get-go? Maybe Lorenzo can start, and then Beatrice can chime in after that. I think we lost Lorenzo. Maybe Beatrice starts then.
Yeah, I think Lorenzo dropped. I would say both. Different projects have different ways of putting the cost of O&M in terms of, like, especially the big replacements. I think most of the time, the models that I have seen work is when the EPC contractor is also the O&M operator, the operator of the project for a couple of years. Then more replacements are guaranteed. However, we find that things like batteries or the larger equipment, like batteries, if there's a transformer, for example, or generator, then those are probably part of cost that will be borne by SPVs if they need replacement because they have longer lifespan. Batteries maybe 7 years, so it's hard to put that on their O&M unless, of course, it's factored into the operating model. However, most of the time it's usually the small items, just guaranteeing the outputs of the system, making sure that the system is performing to the level at which the system is supposed to perform. So I would say most of the time is split between the operator, the O&M operator, if different, and the SPV. And for those that are just SPV based, then the SPV carries all the costs.
Understood. Great. Duncan, is this the same on your end, on the projects you undertook?
Yes, it is. And also in terms of the replacement of, say, the inverters and mostly the inverters, because rarely do you get a faulty panel. So for the inverters, they do come with the warranties from the manufacturer. So sometimes we have found ourselves in a situation whereby we are replacing the inverters before the end of the warranty period, and the manufacturer sends a new set of inverters, and we sent the faulty ones, and then after we have not experienced one which has failed after the warranty period is over. So the warranty is also from the manufacturer comes into play in this scenario.
Okay, understood. And how long is the typical warranty from, not the manufacturer, but from your end for the project?
From our end, we do offer the 1 year fully dedicated O&M before signing off the project. 1 year is normally enough to ensure, to verify that everything has worked properly.
Okay.
And then the manufacturer's warranty always comes with 25 years roughly for the panels, and almost 7 to 6 years for the inverters.
Okay.
Which are the key components for the system, yeah.
Yes, and are there any technological breakthroughs on the inverters, or if you could just walk us through that as well.
On the inverters, yes, somehow, because I think the largest inverter, and I guess if we have any inverter expert in the session will weigh in. The largest inverter we have seen in the market is a 185 Huawei, but which roughly the efficiency has gone up. That's what I can say from what was happening previously. In 2017 when we installed the first one, and the ones we are installing currently, we have very few breakdowns as compared to the past.
Okay, that is good. So that means there's some sort of monitoring, I assume.
Correct.
Device. Okay, this is fine. Yeah, and so Beatrice, is this also the case? You have a preferred type of inverter and manufacturer that you partner with long term to make sure everything's okay?
Well, as investors, I think what we actually just emphasize on is the quality. So the developers, the co-developers have they can go out and search for inverters as long as they are like non-brand, and they have the after sale is very important. The warranty after the sale is quite important. I think inverters break down in the first 1 year. After that, they have stabilized. But I would agree with Duncan.
Okay, great. So basically, one of the next questions that I'd like us to get more into is sort of the structure and trackers for the projects. Like, how do you monitor performance for the developers on your end, Beatrice, and then for just the O&M side on your end, Duncan? And then what is the most favorable way to have these monitorings done?
Right. For us, I think as core developers, because InfraCo Africa really plays a core development role, is just to make sure that what was promised what was modeled mostly in the financial model is what is delivered in terms of annual generation. So we track, like, the key metrics that we track, of course, is annual generation, the revenue. If it's, say, a PPA with a utility company, like, say, Kenya Power, for example, then whatever is delivered to Kenya Power is paid to the utility. The efficiency of the system. Are there any, like, sort of improvements that you can do over time to increase the utilization of the solar plant? What is the impact? I think, as I said earlier, impact is quite critical to us. And so pre-investment, we actually list down the impact that we expect the projects to have either to the grid or to the communities. So one of the key things that we actually monitor quite closely is the impact of the project, apart from the financials. The key ones are financials and the technology and the annual generation. But then we have also the impact, and sometimes we find projects. Now we are finding projects that are actually tracking the carbon their carbon footprint, and that is becoming more and more common. So, and then of course, then we have the usual operations reports that we actually request to get from the developers, either on a quarterly basis or annual basis or half-year basis.
Okay, wow, good. That's really clear. Duncan, on your end?
Well, from our side, we have the monitoring software, which we have developed as a company, which is an improvement of what is in the market, and it's actually the best if I can vouch for it. And we do monitor the systems on a daily basis, and also prepare reports on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, and also half-year basis, and also annual basis. So we do check the system performance just in case if there is anyone that is underperforming. The monitoring software is able to detect and send the reports on our end for action, and specify the exact string and the exact inverter which is not performing. That helps us to ensure that we are giving the end user what we promised. So monitoring goes back to O&M, which becomes a pivotal element in all the solar systems.
Okay, understood. Great. Welcome back, Lorenzo. We lost you there for a moment.
Yeah, I had a little problems with my network, but I'm back.
Good. Yeah, we were just talking about structures for tracking and monitoring the solar projects. We just wanted to find out if what the most favorable structures for making sure that the projects are monitored are on your end. Then we can move into the next question.
Well, when I came into Africa, I started developing a utility after spending some time in Kisumu, in that area, and observing the sun, and having over 15 years, 20 years experience in the sector. It seemed quite logical to me for at least open field ground mounted systems to use single axis trackers. We have a simple curve in this part of the world, since we're on the equator, a simple solar curve. So we get, with a single axis tracker, almost the same benefits that you get with a double axis tracker in other parts of the world. But it's a single axis is, of course, much cheaper, highly mechanical, so it saves a lot of problems. So from my point of view, it's the way to go wherever applicable. Just put it that way.
Hi everyone. I think we seem to have lost Alan's connection. We'll try to reconnect with him. Yes, we have Alan.
Hi, I'm back.
Yes.
I lost network as well.
No issues. Alan, you can take this forward now.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for cutting you off there, Lorenzo. Apologies for my network.
No problem, I understand. No, I was just saying, and since we're on the equator and the sun has a simple curve, a relatively simple curve, you can get the benefits from single axis tracking that is almost the same as the benefits from double axis tracking here where we are, as long as you're on the equator. So from my point of view, it's the best option to go wherever you can apply. Of course, it's not always doable, but if you're working on the ground, it's the best option to go. The cost benefits are the best here.
Understood. This is clear. So basically, before you had gotten off before, we were also discussing technological breakthroughs in inverters and what the preferred technology by developers would be for those, since they're such a critical part of the system design. Do you have any input on that? And in terms of the project structure, do they prescribe which partners or which suppliers you have to work with, or is that open to the developer?
In my case, it's open to the developer. Although in the past I have been myself an international distributor of the inverters, I'm not the most updated person on this specific topic at this moment. I use external consultants for this. So I cannot add any value on this discussion.
Alan, are you here with us?
We can start with Duncan, and then
We're going at turns and having interconnection problems.
Yeah, this is becoming. Has Duncan? No, Duncan's still on, right?
Yes, Alan, you can continue as your network.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, yes, you
can. Okay, good. Maybe you can start then, Lorenzo.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, Alan, on the inverter part, although I've been a distributor of inverters in the past, I'm not currently the most expert on this topic. So it's not. I don't have much to add on this specific topic.
Understood. Did you hear my question following that on the localized, levelized cost of energy?
No, I didn't hear.
Okay. Then that's okay. Let me repeat that so that we can start with that question then. So I was just explaining that we would also like to understand how technology is helping to lower the cost to make these projects cost competitive, and how is it helping to lower the levelized cost of energy. So basically, the cost of power that's produced by the solar over a period of time, how is it helping to decrease this? The technology that the projects you guys are running. So could you weigh in on that a little bit?
I would say that technology has done its job very, very efficiently over the years. When I was doing power plants in 2005 in Europe, we were selling the average per megawatt was considered at about 5 million euro. Today, we're less than $1 million per megawatt per ground installed. As developers, we were selling projects at about $400,000 per megawatt back in the good old days. And modules were costing 3.22 euro per watt. Now we're talking 20 cents, 21, 22 cents per watt per modules. But technology's done its part. I don't think we can ask technology to do much more, although it will get better, maybe, but at the same time, indicators are that the reduction of cost of solar LCOE due to benefits from technology and cost of technology at a certain point stops. It cannot always go down. Cannot, otherwise it would go down to less than zero. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think we've already more or less reached the best we can do from that point of view. But the technology is only a part of the tariff, the resulting tariff of solar. Unfortunately, everything else right now is severely hurting us everywhere in the world, also in this part of it. The effects of the war, the effects of logistics, the effects of confused government policies, the effects of renegotiating PPAs that have already been executed, which then increases risk rating and lowers investor confidence. It's all these other things that are hurting us in terms of competitive tariffs. Technology is not part already.
Okay. Wow, I have a few more questions to that, but let's first hear from Duncan.
Just to add on what Lorenzo has said, indeed, technology has played and has continuously been playing a great role in terms of improvements. The cost per kilowatt on what we had in the early 90s and the 2017 has greatly reduced. This makes it easy for the payback period to the end user to be even much less as compared to the system we're installing today and the system that we installed in 2016. The payback period is for the current system is very minimal compared to what we installed in 2017, largely because of the panel size has increased and at the same time reduced in price per watt, and also the efficiency in terms of the structures, say the trackers currently, which are able to track and move in according to where the sun or the solar is, especially the rotating trackers. That ensures that at any one point, the system is producing. This has greatly also improved the payback and reduced the LCOE. Currently, we are at around 0.02 from almost 0.05 in 2000. If you get the average LCOE, mainly because of the improvement in technology. Also, the improved inverters. This ensures that there is minimal wastage of the energy which is produced. All these coupled together has ensured that with time and the systems are more and more competitive. And we also look forward to the point whereby we shall get a 1 kilowatt panel size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Anything to add, Beatrice?
I would say maybe just 2 points for me. Well, if you compare to other technologies, for example, hydro, which is like a very, very mature technology, the LCOE of solar, I think, is still a bit higher than that of hydro, for example. However, with advancement in technology in the solar space, we expect this to come down in the long run. However, from current observations, I think from 2020 to now, we're seeing prices of solar panels and solar systems in general up in terms of pricing. I think in 2020 we could, without contradiction, say that the price of solar is actually coming down. However, the projects that we are evaluating now from 2020 or maybe 2019 to now, we're seeing like a drastic increase in prices. It could be as a result of the world economics or like COVID recovery and everything. But I'm really curious to know, maybe from Duncan, maybe because he's the one in that space. Are we likely to see a decrease in prices like in the coming, and how long are we likely to see this increase? Because currently EPC costs of solar, say in 2020, and what we're seeing now is almost a 15 to 20% increase in the cost. It could be as a result of logistics and prices of solar, the battery, in terms of batteries, the issues with the components of the battery components. But I'm really curious to know when we expect to see at least the decline in the prices of solar eventually, because right now there's a small peak. I don't know whether it's temporary or permanent.
Yes, indeed, there's a peak, which somehow, according to, and when the Jinko guys come, I'd like them to explain to us why. Partially because of one, the increased cost of freight. I think that's one of the major reasons that has made the panel price to go up, and also the increased commodity market. The prices of the commodity prices, the titanium, the silicon, has somehow gone up, and that silicon, especially, which forms part of the raw materials in the module manufacturing, the price from the commodity index has risen sharply. Reasons I cannot explain why. Only the guys in that field can. But in terms of the freight, indeed, other factors held constant. Somehow, the holding of, especially partially, the corona effect somehow hit us hard because of the holding of the containers by the European and the American market. That increased also the freight cost, which ultimately led to the end user price being high. And also the commodity market, that's one. In terms of the batteries, somehow the battery prices are going down instead of increasing. They increased somehow in slightly in in first quarter, but there's a system that we're installing currently of over 1 megawatt, but I guess over 3 megawatt battery that, and the prices are somehow slightly lower than what was there in the first quarter. There's some volatility in terms of pricing, which I don't know how we can, these are the external factors which are beyond our control, but somehow not as expensive today as it was in 2017 from our analysis.
Yeah,
It's
the general
expensive you
trend.
compare. Yeah, it's expensive you compare it with say last year that quarter. It's slightly expensive by somehow 2 cents if you compare it with today, but not as expensive as it was in 5 years. Yes, thank you.
One last question from everyone before I open it up to the people who have attended, to any questions from the audience. I want to know what's in Uganda. I've seen that depending on the leverage that a developer or project owner has, they can get a letter from the president with a unique tariff for them, like a specialized tariff depending on the scale of their project. So on the policy side, in your experience, is this something that you're able to influence, and is it also a large driver for you to invest in a project, or is it something that basically what's the biggest driver on your end for the project payback, and have you seen these kind of policy issues on your end? Duncan, you can start, then Lorenzo after that, and Beatrice last.
From my end, we have not seen them, and rarely do we influence them because we always check against the utility pricing. So maybe Beatrice and Lorenzo would be best placed to answer that.
Okay. Lorenzo?
Yeah. I'd like to pick up a second on the discussion before, just to give you a couple of inputs. Regarding the silicon pricing, since I used to be very specialized in the silicon sector, I'm quite expert on this specific topic. And the silicon is a highly energy intensive industry. It uses an enormous amount of energy for its production. So, of course, in a moment when there's energy crisis and the energy costs go up, the costs of silicon also go up. It's also sensitive to speculation, which of course there's a lot of right now. So between the two, that causes the increase of the cost of silicon. Regarding the panels costs, from the information I have from international sources, I'm also an old partner of Ying Li. I've met Jinko. I've met all these people in the good old days, and it's highly influenced by the demand for solar that's growing in China, the domestic market, Chinese market, which is absorbing a huge amount of material right now. And solar is sensitive to cost and demand. So, being a very high local demand, it increases the Chinese increase the cost. If you want to buy it, if you want to take their allocations, you have to pay for it. I would not gamble on any reduction of solar in the next 5 to 10 years. My impression is that prices will stay up and they will go higher in the next few years, not down. Maybe in 7, 8 years, they might start to go down a little bit more. They might go to less than 20 cents per watt per module. We might see 0.65, 0.70 USD per watt installed in this part of the world, but it's hopeful thinking. Do not expect, I suggest don't expect it to go down, not in the short term. And respect to government policies, every government has their own way of dealing with things. Of course, in a government like Uganda, where you have an extremely powerful president, having a direct support from the man that decides everything in that country is, of course, very positive. And this works a bit down around the table in every government. It makes a much more favorable environment for investing. But these are not positive policies because they sort of create this very depends who you know kind of situation. We are well placed from that point of view. We know just about all the governments in this area, but it's not a good way of constructing business. Business should be done based on capacity, knowledge, experience, and the assurances you can have delivering it should not be based on who you know, your friends of friends, and cousins and uncles, etc. But instead, that is the way it is right now.
Yeah, very true. Thank you. Beatrice?
Well, I would say in terms of the government support, it's a big debate, especially for the large IPPs, because a lot of times that the investors, especially debt providers, require like government support as a fallback plan to their investment or to their debt provision. We are seeing less and less in Kenya specifically. I think we are seeing less and less of like a government letter of support for sure. However, in terms of tariff, for most of the East African countries, I think Uganda, Kenya, I'm not very sure about Rwanda. There's a feed-in tariff regime, or there was a feed-in tariff regime quite recently for smaller projects that are less than 20 megawatts, where like the tariff is pre-agreed, or like is already known. So when you're developing the project, you already have the tariff for the smaller projects that are 20 megawatts and below. For the larger projects that are 20 megawatts and above, most of the time the developer proposes a tariff to the utility or to the regulator. And then I think different governments, as Lorenzo has said, depends on how powerful the president is. But for countries like Kenya that has actually a policy on the regulation in place for renewable energy, then there's a mechanism for like actually tariff negotiations where the utility provider, the regulator, and the Ministry of Energy have like a committee that sits down and negotiates PPAs with the developers. Of course, there's a bit of political influence in some instances, but the general approach is that. And the negotiated tariff is really within certain brackets, I would believe, but it is based on the business model of the specific project that is under negotiation. So you'll find different projects with different tariffs, but then at the same time, you'll also find different projects with the same tariff. So it just depends on how well the project developers negotiated with the utilities. And to a large extent, by the time the tariff is negotiated, and this is where Lorenzo started when we started this conversation. It depends on how good the feasibility study was, because you can negotiate a tariff, and then once you do a detailed feasibility study and engineering design, then the tariff no longer holds water, because then all that has changed. So government support depends on jurisdiction. We see some governments very supportive of certain projects that are maybe very key to their strategies, that they're not supportive to other projects.
Understood. Well, very, very, very critical information. Thank you for sharing. I want to open up to the audience to see if they have any questions for us. Then we can wrap up on time.
So we have two questions with us. Should I just put them up on display?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So we have a first question. Mr. Allen, you can take this forward now.
Okay, so this question is from Harish. I can't, if I butcher your last name, forgive me, Jayaram. And this person is asking, what is the typical overall project cost for 10 megawatt in East Africa? Maybe we can start with Beatrice.
Well, thank you. I know the cost generally, I think, has, I would say, a range. Typical overall cost over 10 megawatts, I would give it a range of between maybe $1 per watt peak and maybe 1.5, or maybe all the way up to 2. Depends. It depends on very many things. It depends on the development cost. We are seeing typically most of these 10 megawatt projects, and we have one under development, actually 2 in Kenya. It has taken quite a while to develop, and the longer the period of development, the more the costs accumulate. But I think the general EPC costs that we are seeing in the market right now, maybe my figures are a bit old, but I would say between $1 per megawatt per watt peak to around $1.5 to $2.
Okay. Great. Duncan, is this the typical cost on your end as well?
Well, for EPC, in case it's a 10 megawatt project, might cost roughly between 6.5 to 8 million USD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Lorenzo, is this different on your end, or do you also confirm that this is the typical range?
I would tend to agree with Beatrice. Duncan can do that kind of price. He's found a client. seems a bit optimistic today. Those were the prices that I was considering in 2019 as very realistic. Today, 0.65. I would love it. I would sign tomorrow. 0.65.
Okay.
I agree with that, Lorenzo.
All right. Next question, please. All right. Oh, okay. This is also from Harish. What is the debt interest rate, tenure, and structure available today for utility scale projects? Let's start with Beatrice, and then same order as before.
Well, I'm not an expert in that. We're more aligned to like equity investments. However, it depends really. It depends on the debt provider. However, and also depends on the currency of the debt. If it's hard currency debt, then the typical interest rates I think are between 6% and maybe I would say 10%, depends on the tenure as well. We have different caliber of debt. We have those short-term debts like 2 to 5 years, and then we have medium-term debts that are between 5 to 8 years with maybe a construction grace period, and then we have the concessional debts that are provided at quite low interest rates but over a long period of time. Those are sometimes hard to come. So depending on what kind of debt the developers get, the interest will really be very, very, it will range over a very big range depending on the tenor and the structure and who's providing the debt. Is it a senior debt? Is it a junior debt? Is it a mezzanine debt? Will it be refinanced in the future? There are quite a number of things that are at play, but really I'm not a debt expert.
Okay, and just a quick follow-up question on that. What's the national interest rate in Kenya right now for any type of local currency financing, actually, from the bank?
I think it's around between 11 and 15%, average of 13%.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah.
Well, comparatively, compared to Uganda. Ours is close to 28% now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite high. Duncan, do you have any idea about the debt interest rate?
Yeah, just to add on Beatrice, the catch on the interest rate is the bank might tell you it's 13% interest, but they have this hidden cost of the processing. So if you do the effective interest, almost ends up to around 19% if you add those processing fees and the rest, the interest, processing fees and the upfront fees and the rest. So the effective interest roughly goes to around 18%. But in the that is in our local currency. But in the hard currency one, ranges between 6 to 10%, as Beatrice had mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And on the side of Lorenzo, I know it's grant funding, but do you have any input on this last question?
Actually, we do, because we don't just do grant funding, we also do debt funding, and we do through a partner company leasing operation. Debt funding for utility solar it's a bit of a vague question. As was saying, there are lots of depends. In other words, it depends on what kind of debt funding you're looking at, if it's non-recourse, if it's corporate funding, non-corporate funding, if it's through local organizations, through foreign organizations. Just to give a clear idea of the window, there's debt funding happening through AFD at 3-4%, but it's almost impossible to access it. Ministry of Energy, when you negotiate a PPA, they always tell you that Kenyan gets 4%, only pays 4% interest. But Kenyan, not everybody. It's something only Kenyan gets. Generally, I would say a normal non-recourse, the all-in cost of capital would be around somewhere in the window between 6.5 and 8.5%. We are currently trying to organizing ourselves to have a structure directly located in Europe to bridge finance African solar developments with financing directly from the European Investment Bank, non-recourse debt funding. And that should go in the window between 3 and 4%. Still initial stage on that. But, you can get debt financing in Europe at 2% to 3%. Then, of course, there are additional costs on top, but it is possible to go quite lower than what you find here on the market. Also, if you have the possibility to do corporate financing, you give a real guarantee against the loan, then you can go quite low. So there are many depends, depending on how the financing is structured. For instance, one of the advantages of the grants is that if you have a grant from the European Union or from the World Bank or other institutions, it's much easier to access low-cost debt financing institutional lending.
All right, good. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any more questions from the audience?
No, Mr. Allen, I think that's all we have for now.
All right. Unfortunately, we can't stay here all day. So, and we're 2 minutes over the time, but thank you everyone for listening in, and thank you panelists for sharing your knowledge and potentially some resources as well. So yeah, thank you for
Very
your time.
interesting conversation.
Thank you all. Thank you all very much, all our esteemed panelists, for this wonderful session. And a very special thanks to Mr. Allen for superbly managing this session. You were absolutely outstanding. The show is not over yet. We are taking a short networking break and we'll be back with another exciting session on the topic tech advancements, constructing profitable projects, and assessing viability with storage. Till then, explore our exhibition lounge, network with your peers, and join our sponsors on the networking tables. Thank you.
Thank you very much.